So now we've moved on to my Colourpop collection. I have 4 eyeshadow palettes from them. I'm actually going to be putting these 2 on probation, which were the first 2 palettes that they came out with, and I'm going to be keeping these 2, which were more recent releases. So the reason why I'm putting these 2 on probation is because for the Yes Please palette, honestly, this color scheme, honestly, to me is, I don't know what it is, it just seems almost like a little bit too warm, which is crazy because I love warm tone eyeshadows, but I just don't, I don't know, I haven't loved the looks that I've done with this so far, so I'm going to try to give it another shot, and if it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. But I will say that this probably saved me money on the Natasha Denona Sunset palette, because I realized with this being so similar to it, I probably wouldn't like that palette that much either. Then with the Femme Rosa palette, I do like this palette, but again, what kills me with this is some of the shades in here just are way too repetitive, so I will do some more looks with it because I did really like the looks that I came up with, but honestly, if I can't get past the sort of repetitive shades in here, then I may just end up decluttering it as well. Like I said, I'm keeping these 2, the Element of Surprise and the You Had Me at Hello palettes. I really love both of these. This one is sort of like more the neutrals palette that I think I personally was looking for from Colourpop. Really nice selection of mattes and then really nice shimmers. Nothing in here feels repeated or sort of duplicated, so I appreciate that. And then the Element of Surprise palette, honestly, I wasn't thinking that I was going to like this palette as much, but the swatches really didn't do it justice. There are some really beautiful duochrome shades in here, and that's what I really like about this palette, is it's basically a duochrome palette with some nice mattes mixed in to help you complete a look. So I'm definitely going to hold on to this one as well. So next up I have Huda Beauty. This is one of the newer brands to my collection, but these 4 she came out with in a collection and I bought them all together, and I actually recently purchased these 2. So you might think, with these being more recent purchases, that I'd be keeping all of them, but that's not the case. I'm actually going to be putting the Desert Dust palette on probation. I've used this palette probably about 5 or 6 times now, and what I've found is that the shades in here are just very not pigmented on my skin tone, at least. So I'm pretty disappointed in that, and I'm going to see if I can get this to work. But honestly, if I feel like I can get better use out of other eyeshadows I have in my collection that are similar, then this may not stay in my collection. Next up here I have the Rose Gold palette, and unpopular opinion here, I actually prefer this palette way more than the Desert Dust palette. The mattes in here still aren't the greatest mattes in the world, like you do have to build them up, but I definitely find them to be more pigmented than the ones in the Desert Dust palette. And the texture shades up here that everybody made such a fuss about, I personally don't really have too much of a problem with them. I think Rose Gold and Trust Fund are probably the 2 that are like the hardest to work with, just because they're so sort of stiff in the pan, but I don't feel like these are that difficult to work with. I mean, I'm somebody who generally uses my finger with these shimmery shades. Like any shades I'm putting on my lid, I tend to like to use my finger, so I don't mind using these at all. And yeah, I like this palette. I like the color scheme, so I am going to be holding on to this one. I'm also going to be holding on to all 4 of my Huda Beauty Obsessions palettes. I freaking love these. I think they're amazing. This is a palette that I might do a video on. This one's the smoky one, this is the electric one. These are just beautiful. This is the warm browns one, this is the mauves one, also just gorgeous. And the formula here I actually really enjoy. So the formula in these palettes is actually different from the Desert Dusk and the Rose Gold, but I actually prefer the formula in these much more than I do in the original palettes from her line. So I'm definitely going to be holding on to these, and like I said, I may even do a video on them because these are really good. I can see these being some of my favorite palettes going into 2018 for sure. So for Miss Huda, I am keeping these 4 palettes here, as well as the Rose Gold palette, and I'm going to be putting this Desert Dust palette on palette probation. Next up, we have this little adorable trio. These are my Smashbox cover shot palettes, and I'm keeping all 3 of these because I just adore them. Also, can we just focus on the packaging for a second, because it's like really cool. Alright, so this is the Ablaze palette, and I feel like this is a good redux of some of the warmer tone palettes that we've seen over the past couple of years. And again, I just very well thought out. I mean, this is a very small palette and you're only getting 8 shades, but I just think that the choices in here are really smart, and they make sense, and there's nothing being duplicated, and the palette is very pleasing to the eyes, and the actual formula of these is really, really good as well, so I'm definitely holding on to this one. The packaging. This one is the Smoky palette, and keeping this one for similar reasons. I think they just did a really good job of choosing colors that were, you know, could fall into that smoky category but weren't too repetitive. I love this sort of like metallic burgundy and the green in here. The grays are nice too. This taupe is really nice, so definitely holding on to this one. All right, we got to do it for this one too, right? And then this one is the bold one, which I have been hearing that this one is now discontinued or being discontinued. I would hope that's not the case because this is amazing. These are some of the best matte colorful eyeshadows I've ever used, and I was really shocked. I did not expect these to be that good. Smashbox is not a brand that's known for doing colorful matte eyeshadows, and colorful matte eyeshadows tend to be really hard to do, so I'm very, very impressed with this overall, and it's just such a great palette to have when you're doing colorful looks because these can really help almost be like transition shades. So yeah, love this palette. So with Smashbox, I think we have our first brand from which I am keeping all eyeshadow palettes. So hooray! Yay, Smashbox! Woo! So from Natasha Denona, I have 3 eyeshadow palettes, the Lila and then the 2 holiday palettes. So this is the Lila palette and I'm going to be keeping this one. The shades in here are really nice. Are they $129 nice? I think absolutely not. In fact, I don't know, I just feel like a couple of the shimmer shades they could have a little bit more oomph to them, but you can't deny that the quality is nice here. Man, $129, I think that's just crazy, but the colors in here are pretty and I do use every single color in here. Then next up we have these 2 holiday palettes, the 01 Joya, which is this one, and the 02 Aries, which is this one. I really like these as well. I know some people said they didn't like these because the formula is different and there is a new eyeshadow formula. I think that I was about to call her Anastasia. There is a new eyeshadow formula that Natasha introduced in this palette, and it's more of a topper shade, but I actually do really like it as well. Again, $48 though, that's definitely very pricey, and I may do a video on these palettes coming up soon talking about the packaging because there's a very interesting feature of the packaging on both of these as well as this one that it's really weird. So I might post that video, so stay tuned for that. So for my Natasha Denona palettes, I am going to be keeping them. Eyeshadow palettes from Kat Von D, as you can see, and I am going to go through them really quickly. First up, this is the shade Light palette. I'm actually going to be decluttering this one, which is so unfortunate. The formula of these mattes is amazing, probably some of the best that I've used, but unfortunately, I just don't get a lot of use out of this palette. There's just way too many sort of off-white tones, and I really hate that in palettes. Again, I just feel like palette space is valuable real estate, and I can't stand when brands don't take advantage of that and put truly unique and different colors. I get that this is a neutral palette and so there's not going to be that much variety, but there definitely could have been more than this, and nobody needs 4 shades of off-white in one palette, so I'm going to be getting rid of this. Next up I have the Metal Matte palette, which is actually too big to even get in the entire frame. This is quite a long palette and I store this in a different place from my other palettes, hence why I end up not reaching for this very often. The times that I have used this, I have liked the looks that I've come up with, but I definitely need to just put this in a place where I use it more often, so I will be putting this on palette probation. Next up I have the Kat Von D Monarch palette, which I really like the colors in here, but again I just don't reach for this as often, so it's going on probation. And lastly I have the Alchemist palette, which I don't really know whether to classify this as a face palette or an eyeshadow palette. I know it can be both. I think I'll put it in my eyeshadow palette category just so I can try to get more use out of this. So this is going on probation as well. So for my 4 Kat Von D palettes, I am putting these 3 on probation, and I'm just outright getting rid of mine. Alright, so next up we have Makeup Revolution, and I have 3 eyeshadow palettes from them. So this first palette we have here is the Neutrals, spelled N-E-W, Trolls, versus Neutrals, the way you would usually spell it. So clever. Anyways, I'm going to be keeping this palette. I actually really like the tones in here. There's some nice, again, warm matte transition shades that are very well done, and the shimmers in here are pretty nice as well. They're not the best in the world, but they are nice, and I think this is a great sort of drugstore palette with some nice tones in it. Kind of mimics some of the reddish tone palettes that are on the market, as well as the rose gold tones, so that's pretty nice. I am going to hold on to this one. Next up, this is the Iconic Pro 2, which is meant to be a dupe for the Lorac Pro 2. I actually don't own the Lorac Pro 2, never did, but I was always kind of sort of interested in it, but just I wasn't sure how I was going to feel about it. So I thought, hey, why not get something that's a cheaper alternative? And I've used this a couple of times and really liked it, but I just haven't used it enough. So I'm going to put this on probation to see if I can get some more use out of it. But quality-wise, I think I do enjoy this palette. Last up here, I have the Makeup Revolution Unicorns Unite palette. I'm going to be decluttering this one because I just found the quality of it wasn't all that great, especially not compared to the first two palettes. So Makeup Revolution I think can be kind of hit or miss, and this was a miss, but fortunately the other two are better quality. So for Makeup Revolution, I will be keeping this one, which is the Neutrals versus Neutrals palette. I'm going to be probationing the Iconic Pro 2, and I'm going to be getting rid of this one, which is the Unicorns Unite. So next up I have TheBalm, and TheBalm is in a very similar situation as my Makeup Revolution palettes in that I have 3 of them, and I'm going to be probationing one, keeping one, and decluttering one. So essentially these two brands for me are like the Kill F Marys of eyeshadow palettes. The one I'm going to be decluttering is the Nude Dude palette, and yeah, literally, if it looks like I've never touched this, it's because I literally have never touched this. So I bought this when it was on sale, and then I just realized, you know what, I just probably don't need these colors, so I was like, don't even bother. So this has been sitting in my collection for a while, and I just have forgotten to get rid of it, so yeah, putting it here to remind myself to get rid of it. Okay, so between these two and knowing my love for berry tone and purple shades, which one do you think I am keeping? Probably this one, but you're wrong. I'm keeping the Meet Matte Nude palette. I absolutely love the quality of this one. I was not expecting to. Again, I got this on sale from Haute Look, but it really did blow me away. I love the tones in here. They work really well on my skin. There's a nice mix of sort of more neutral as well as cooler tone shades as well. The only shade I don't really ever reach for in here is this matte white, but there's enough variety in here for this to be a relevant palette for my skin tone, which I appreciate, so I'm holding on to this one. Now we have the Meet Matrimony palette. This is actually the one I'm putting on probation. I really thought I would enjoy this palette. I think I even bought this when it was... No, I was going to say I think I bought this full price, but I didn't. Never buy Balm eyeshadow palette full price because they have flash sales several times throughout the year, and they sell a lot of their stuff on Haute Look, which they usually do for half off, so yeah. Anyways, I thought I would really enjoy this palette, and I don't. The formula of this is different. I did check the ingredients. It's very, very different, and the shades in here are a lot drier, a lot harder to work with, and I feel conflicted about these. So I'm just going to put this in my probation pile, but I don't know that it will stay in my collection, to be quite honest. Alright, so for my Balm palettes, we are killing Nude Dude, we are marrying Meet Matte Nude, and we're just messing around with Meet Matrimony. Okay, so Dose of Colors is my next brand. I have 3 eyeshadow palettes from them. I am keeping all of these, so I will try to be very brief here. First up, this is the Eyes Cream palette. I absolutely adore this eyeshadow palette. Really interesting color scheme, but all of these work really nicely. Even this lavender shade I really like, so I'm going to be holding on to this. I'm also going to be definitely holding on to the Baked Browns palette, which is this one, and the Marvelous Mauves. These are some of the best mattes I've worked with in my life. They are very soft and very blendable, and I definitely want to pick up the 2 newest ones that released as well. So now moving on really quickly, we have Wet n Wild. First, I have the OG Comfort Zone palette, which has now been sort of redone, reformulated, and been hearing people say that they like the original one better. Definitely going to be holding on to this. I don't reach for it that often, but when I do, I am always blown away by it. And now that I like to use palettes in conjunction with other palettes, this has got some really nice sort of staple lid shades in it. Then I have these two, which were limited edition ones that kind of were meant to be kind of like, I guess, Naked 3 dupes. They're very rosy tone. I'm going to pass these along. These definitely didn't have the same quality as the Comfort Zone palette, so they can go. Next up, I have these Estee Edit palettes. These actually came in a holiday set from 2015, I believe. And yeah, so this one's actually like a face and eye palette, although I will say I consider it to be a face palette, but I'll show it anyways. I freaking love this palette for highlighter. These are stunning shades. I wish they offered this as like a permanent sort of palette. I know Estee Edit doesn't even exist anymore, but this is absolutely gorgeous, and this is what I wished the glow kits were. The glow kits are just too glittery for me. The ones by Anastasia Beverly Hills. This is what a highlighter palette should look like. However, this palette right here, which is the eyeshadow palette, the actual dedicated eyeshadow palette, this one I don't know, I'm not so fond of it. I mean, I love the colors in here, but first of all, these two shades right here actually look very similar to two of the shades in the highlighter palette, and I don't know, I just feel like this was a very weird selection of colors, and the pans are weirdly large for these types of colors. I feel like they could have cut each of these in half, which also would have looked really cool geometrically, I think, and just gave us like double the amount of colors. But hey, I didn't design this palette. I will say that when I've used this palette, I found the shades in here to be good quality, so I'll go ahead and put this in my probation pile just to give it another shot. Hey guys, so we are approaching the last of the brands that I have multiple palettes of, and these are the Lime Crime Venus 1 and Venus 2 palettes. Yes, I know Lime Crime is a pretty crappy brand. I myself have not purchased from them in a couple of years, and I give them quite the side eye, but I will say that I do enjoy both of these palettes, and I think they're good quality, and I will be keeping both of them. So this is the Venus one, and I feel like it was one of the original red toned eyeshadow palettes. It was like the Modern Renaissance before the Modern Renaissance, and the quality here is very good, so I will be holding on to it. Next up, this is the Venus 2 palette, and ironically I feel like this was also the sort of Subculture palette before Subculture, and yeah, the shades in here are also really nice. The pigmentation is nice, so I will be holding on to this one as well. Next up here, I have some of my one palette brands. I thought I would go ahead and just show all the ones that I'm keeping first. First up, we have the Colored Rain Queen of Hearts palette. This is one of my favorite palettes in my entire collection. The shades in here are just absolutely gorgeous, and the formula of these is great. The mattes blend really well. The metallics are very foiled, so definitely holding on to this one. Sadly, I only have one Viseart palette. This is the Dark Mattes palette. I absolutely love the quality of this. They feel rather dry, but I don't care about that. They go onto the eyes really nicely, blend really well. The color selection here is just amazing, and I will probably own other Viseart palettes in the future. Next up, this is the Laura Mercier Eye Art Artists palette. Such a redundant name, but I love this eyeshadow palette. I love the purple tones in here, and these mattes are also some of the best mattes I've ever worked with. They are very blendable and very pigmented, so I'm definitely holding on to this one. Next up, this is an eyeshadow palette from Japanesque, particularly their Japanesque color line, which is their sort of color cosmetics line, because Japanesque is a brand I believe that's known for their brushes, but they do have color cosmetics now, and this is one of their palettes. It's the Pixelated Colors palette. I'm really surprised that this palette hadn't been talked about more. It's been out for a couple of years. In fact, I'm not even sure if this is still available, but if it is, I think this is an amazing palette. You've got these sort of satiny neutral shades here, but the real standout of this palette are these metallic, almost duochrome glittery shades. They're really beautiful, and I honestly haven't gotten a lot of use out of these just because I had been storing them kind of weirdly, but I want to put this out so that I use them. But I know that I love these. These are really unique to my collection, and I'm definitely holding on to this palette. Last up, I have this little quad here, and again, it's just a quad, but you know, I've shown other quads, so in the spirit of keeping it all consistent, I thought I'd show this one. This is by Be a Bombshell Cosmetics. I actually got this in an Ipsy bag a while ago because it's been a while since I've been subscribed to Ipsy, but I actually really like the color story here, and the quality of these eyeshadows seems really nice as well. I don't think I've actually ever used these on my eyes though, so I am going to go ahead and just keep this one because it swatches nicely and the colors in here are really nice, so hopefully I do get some use out of it. Okay, and for my eyeshadow palettes that I am going to keep as well, I forgot to mention my Moschino and Sephora palette, and the packaging on this is just amazing. So for this eyeshadow palette, I actually am going to be keeping it. The color selection in here is actually quite nice, but I have used this palette once, or no, twice actually, and honestly it's nothing to write home about. The quality of these is just okay. Some of the tones in here are actually quite similar to one another as well, but to be completely honest, I could never reach for this palette again, and the makeup enthusiast in me just super appreciates the packaging. I mean, this is probably, no, this is the best packaging I've ever seen on an eyeshadow palette. This and the box, I mean, it literally looks like a toy. It's so adorable. Next up, these are my one brand eyeshadow palettes that I'm going to be decluttering. So sadly, the only palette I have from Juvia's Place is the Zulu palette, and this palette is just really bad. I think maybe if you have a fair to medium skin tone, these shades will show up better on your skin tone, but on a deeper skin tone, these shades just really aren't pigmented. The metallic shades in here, which there are 3, are actually quite nice, and the turquoise and the pink and purple aren't that bad, but this entire row up here, including this warm matte brown, which is so odd, are very, very not pigmented on my skin tone. So yeah, unfortunately I'll have to be getting rid of this, and I knew going into this that this was the one that people said, oh, it's not all that good, it's the worst palette they've ever done, but I just really liked the color story here and I wanted it to work. I won't let that stop me from trying Juvia's Place palettes in the future, but this one's definitely gotta go. Next up, this is the L'Oreal La Palette Nude one, and this was a drugstore palette, obviously. I actually really enjoyed the matte shades in here, ironically, but the shimmer shades were not that great, which normally you have the reverse of drugstore palettes. The shimmer shades are great and the matte shades are not so good, but even though I like the mattes in here, I have too many neutral mattes already, and I think the majority of this palette is shimmers anyways, and like I said, the shimmers just don't impress me whatsoever, so I'm going to be decluttering this palette. Next up, this is the Ombre Rouge palette by Becca, and I really wanted this one to work. I liked the layout of this and the format of this. I wanted Urban Decay to release a Naked Basics palette that was warm, and they hadn't done that, so I was kind of excited when I saw this because I feel like that kind of filled that void for me, but to be honest, this doesn't really work that well on my skin. First of all, these aren't even really matte shades. They kind of have this weird sheen to them, which is not very flattering on my skin for some reason. These two shades are quite similar, and then I just feel like you don't have a shade that's really deep enough to make this really complete palette, which I feel like for example, the Dose of Colors, Baked Browns, and Marvelous Mauves, like their palettes in that vein are a good example of how to do a sort of monochromatic palette, but have still variation among the shades, and I feel like this one just didn't do that very well, so I'm getting rid of it. So this next palette is from Physicians Formula. It's one of their shimmer strips in the, I think this is called Blue Eyes Pop, and I remember really liking this sort of palette, although I will say I gravitated mostly towards the sort of gold and bronze shades in here, whereas ironically now I'm actually really attracted to the blue shades in here. But I've just had this palette for a really, really long time. I don't even think the pigmentation on it is as good as it once was, so definitely just going to be decluttering this and putting it right into the trash bin. Alright, if you're still hanging in there, man, do you have some true dedication, because I myself am starting to get very sleepy. Fortunately, I only have these last 2 palettes to talk about. These are my other one brand eyeshadow palettes, and these 2 are actually ones that I'm going to be putting on probation. So this is the Sleek Arabian Nights palette. This was actually a limited edition palette, but I wanted to get my hands on it because I really liked the color selection in here, and I'd been wanting to try eyeshadows from Sleek anyways, but again, I saw this one was limited edition and I was like, oh my gosh, I gotta get this one because I really like the color selection. Unfortunately, I haven't used it that much to have a true opinion of it, so I'm going to be putting it on palette probation. And then lastly, I have this Sonia Kashuk palette here, which is called Gems and Jewels, and I really thought I would love this one because, I mean, look at the jewel tones here, they're so pretty. Unfortunately, these are definitely harder to work with. Some of them are more so topper shades. You can kind of even see like some hard pan going on here. So I am going to put this on palette probation because I want to give it another shot, but I don't know how much of a real chance this has of staying in my collection, to be honest. So this is my pile of palettes that I am decluttering. There are a total of 16 eyeshadow palettes here. Here is one section where I keep my eyeshadow palettes. These are little utility holders that I got from Target. I did a whole video on my eyeshadow palette storage if you want to see that, and this whole thing used to be full, and as you can see right now only this one is filled up. I do have some Urban Decay palettes that I am going to also put on top of here as well. And then here is where I keep the remainder of most of my eyeshadow palettes. Again, if you want to see how I store mine, you can check out the earlier video I have on my channel about this. This whole entire rack used to be completely full, and then I have this other storage area over here that was kind of like my overflow. Right now I put my Smashbox palettes there. My 2 melt stacks are just sitting out right here. My Huda Beauty palettes are there. That's one of the Tarte palettes. And as you can see, there's lots of spaces in here. So this is definitely a lot less palettes that I'm used to seeing in this area. Lastly, here we've got arguably the most important area, which is my palette probation drawer. I decided to keep all of these in a drawer. So these are some of the longer palettes over here and back here. And then we've got some up here as well. I went through and counted, and the total number of palettes that I have in here right now is 25, and the total number of palettes in my keep pile right now is 47. Like I said before, I will be doing a full video introing this palette probation project, so if you want to know more about that, then definitely feel free to subscribe to my channel. Either way, thank you so much for watching.